Star Wars 7x7 episode 2142. Today, my goodness, my episode from yesterday about whether Boba Fett is actually a Mandalorian has inspired a lot of feedback, which is resulting in corrections and elaborations, which is what we're doing today. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, let's dig in. First of all, thank you so much to the folks who chimed in on YouTube and Twitter to give me additional information and background about Boba Fett and about Mandalorians that will further enhance our conversation about him. And let me start off with the Department of Corrections. I had it pointed out to me that Mandalorian clan emblems do not necessarily only appear on the right pauldron, they appear in other places as well, so I was a little bit too focused on that aspect thanks to the Mandalorian, so that's on me. And as far as Boba Fett goes, well, he has two symbols on his armor. He has the skull on his left pauldron, so we'll take care of that one first. Right now, as it stands in the current canon, that is just a symbol of Mandalorian iconography. It is the skull of the mythosaur. That's all it is and all it means at this point. However, in Legends, it was actually the emblem that was worn by the Mandalore, meaning the person who was the ruler of Mandalore. Boba Fett in Legends actually was at one point the ruler of Mandalore. This happened in 41 ABY, so long after the events of the original trilogy. And obviously when we see him in Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, he was not the Mandalore in that case, so he shouldn't be wearing that symbol. In theory, at least. But it turns out that also in Legends, Jango Fett actually held the title of Mandalore at one point. It was because the person who took him in when Death Watch murdered his family and actually kidnapped his sister and raised his farm, right? The guy who took him in ended up adopting him into his clan, and that dude who took him in was the Mandalore at the time, and when he was killed later, he ultimately took up the mantle of Mandalore from him. So he was the Mandalore for a while, Jango Fett was, and so I suppose you could imagine that when we see Boba Fett in Empire and Jedi, that he is wearing that emblem, possibly in tribute to his father. That's one potential way to look at it. It's not really explained anywhere that I could find in Wikipedia, but that might explain from a Legends standpoint why he had that on his armor when we see him in the original trilogy. And one other thing related to that. So when the Mandalorian Civil War ended, Jango Fett became disillusioned and there were no other battles to fight, and so he went off on his own and became a bounty hunter at that point and basically kind of shined on his own people until eventually the people elected their own Mandalore, which happens to be the Duchess Satine. And this leads to all sorts of political problems and stuff, and so you can imagine that it makes it a little complicated with the notion of Jango passing down the title of Mandalore to Boba Fett, but basically he couldn't do that because Mandalore went in a different direction. So there you go. I think that takes care of the mythosaur skull emblem on Boba Fett's left shoulder. Now, let's talk about the emblem that is on his right chest plate. Right now in the canon continuity, I cannot find anything indicating that there's been a meaning given to that symbol. In Legends, that is the symbol of the clan of Jastar Muriel. Jastar Muriel is the gentleman that I mentioned to you earlier who was a Mandalore, a leader of Mandalore, who rescued Jango Fett when the Death Watch was raiding and killing and burning farms and whatnot. And so Jango was adopted into their clan. They don't actually call it Clan Muriel in Wikipedia anywhere, so I don't know, but that seems like it would be what it would be called, especially if Jastar Muriel was the Mandalore, that he was the leader of all Mandalorians, so he would probably be the leader of his clan as well. It would be named after him, you would imagine, or at least named after, his family line. Anyway, so Django is part of Clan Mareel, we'll call it that for our discussive purposes. And so you would imagine that Boba Fett, being Django's son, would also be, by default, a member of Clan Mareel, and so that would explain why he would have that emblem on his armor. But I guess what isn't really clear is whether Django and Boba are actually participating in Mandalorian society. It certainly doesn't seem like that. And in the current canon, as we talked about yesterday, when Prime Minister Almec of Mandalore says, oh, Jango Fett, I don't know who that guy is, and I don't know how he even got that armor, which isn't even Beskar armor anyway, so what's up with that? So he may be a Mandalorian by birth, and he may be walking around in Mandalorian armor, but is he really participating in Mandalorian society? Jango Fett? The answer is no by the time of his death, and for many years prior, the answer to that is no. The next question is whether Boba Fett becomes participatory in Mandalorian culture, and so far in the canon, we have no evidence to indicate that that's the case. And so where that leaves us, I believe, is that if Clan Mareel is brought into the new canon, then it seems like Boba Fett has a place in Clan Mareel if he wants it, but like his father, he is pursuing his bounty hunter activities, does not seem to be acting like a Mandalorian in the way that we see Mandalorians revered in the Mandalorian TV show, and in the way that we see Mandalorians depicted in the Clone Wars TV series. Maybe we're going to find out more about Mandalorian stuff, I don't know, but for now it seems to me at least that Boba Fett is not acting like a Mandalorian, not living by the Mandalorian code in any particular way, shape, or form, and hadn't been leading up to when he went into the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi. This is how I feel like, assimilating all the evidence and even considering the legend stuff and how the legend stuff may apply, I think Boba Fett has walked away or has not decided to embrace Mandalorian culture in any significant way. This is the vibe that I have gotten out of all of this. So if you disagree with that, I would love to hear it. And I'm so grateful once again for all the feedback that I got about yesterday's episode. I learned a lot about the Legends version of Mandalorian history and culture, and it was really cool to do that. So thank you again for the opportunity and the impetus to dive into that stuff. So with that, we're going to call it an episode, and thank you so much for joining me for it, as always, and may the curve be flattening for you wherever in the world you may be.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.